We are. That was Taxman by the Beatles. I'm sure they were giving you a message there. You work for no one but the Taxman. And that's true. And he works for the banks. But there you go. That's another story. So we've got with us now. Let's get the crowd. Let's get the crowd noise going. Hold on. We've got Mark Devlin. There's the noise. Hold on. There's the audience. There's the applause. Yeah, here we go. I can hear it. More applause. More applause. There we go. There we go. Right. So we've got Mark Devlin with us. So Mark, I know you've been around for quite a while, but for the benefit of people out there that are maybe not too familiar with you and what you do, could you maybe intro yourself and tell us how you woke up and when you realised there was a problem and what it is that you do? Thanks, man. Thanks, man.
Tunes, traveling around, doing gigs. That was my definition of life. But I got to around 2007, 2008, and I started to have some big questions about what this world was really all about. Pretty much the biggest questions you can have, really. What is this place? What created it? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of it all? And I got turned on to the books of David Icke around about that time by my dad, who suggested I should read them. And I did find that those books answered a lot of the big questions I'd had up to that point. I did look at some other authors. I looked at the movie Zeitgeist. The first Zeitgeist movie had a big effect on me. And I started to slowly piece together an entirely new take on this reality and what it's all about. And that process was completed, I would say, around about 2010. And that's when I decided to go public with what I'd learned up to that point. And my main area of interest was what the corporate controlled music industry is really used for, because it's not about fun and entertainment. That's what people are trained to think of it as. I came to realize that it's an absolutely brilliant tool for Satanists and psychopaths to control huge numbers of people under the guise of entertainment. So I set off on my path of research, trying to get down to the true nature of these industries. And I've been doing that now for the best part of 15 years. I've put out a bunch of books. I've done, I don't even know how many interviews and videos and podcasts, probably into the thousands now. Live talks, conferences, any way that I can find of getting out the message and sharing the knowledge that I've come across myself, I now do. And it's become my full-time job.
Fantastic. Right. So, I mean, look, for the benefit of people out there, sometimes it's a bit of a scary thing, especially if they're newbies and they suddenly hear Satanists. And I can imagine some of them rolling their eyes thinking, oh, here we go on this conspiracy thing again. Now, I just want to point out that satanic actually refers to, well, from an astrotheology point of view, from a symbology point of view, satanic was actually in reference to order and structure. Okay, so it's actually the kind of attributes of the system, because the system itself likes order and structure. That's what it's all about, right? But it's like anything. In the third dimension, polarization, that's extremes, extreme opposites, is the order of the day. And so you have those that perhaps look maybe or engage in this satanic Roman, ancient satanic religion from the point of view of order, structure, and sacrifice in terms of dedication to one's art or craft. But then, of course, you've got people that will take that to an opposite extreme, a polarized extreme, and they see that as something which is a little bit nasty and sinister, right? So what are you saying that the music industry is being used for then? Or is it... Can you give us some examples, for example?
Yeah, there's endless examples. I mean, people's definition of Satanism differs from person to person, individual to individual. A lot of people's idea of what it represents involves, sacrificing chickens at 3 a.m. in some forest clearing and dancing around a bonfire. That's a sort of Hollywood version of what it's all about. When I refer to it, I'm referring to an ideology or a mindset. And the word Satan is actually derived from a Hebrew word, which is very similar in Arabic, and it simply means opposer or adversary. And so in this case, we're talking about that mindset standing as an adversary to everything that is inherent to creation, everything which comes from the creator, whatever, you know, your idea might be of that. So the individuals that control these industries adhere to that kind of mindset. I mean, I could get further into it, but it's all in my books, and I'll just keep it on the surface for the purposes of this chat. So entertainment and popular culture has been weaponized against the people. And it's been that way for decades, if not centuries. So it's exactly the same with Hollywood movies, exactly the same with TV shows, exactly the same with cartoons. Any way that the controllers of organized society have of trying to mind control large numbers of people and dictate to them their thoughts and their behaviors, they will take that. And so my specialist area of interest is how music has been weaponized. And I've been able to make quite confidently a blanket statement that any band, any artist that's achieved household name A-list status is going to be beholden to the controllers of these industries and is going to be dancing to their tune. No pun intended. So when they wish for these assets to push some agenda or other, and we've had a few of those the past 3.5 years, haven't we? Then they do what they're told. So if they're asked to make a public service broadcast pushing certain medical interventions, watch how quickly they do it. There are endless examples of this. So that's one aspect of it. Also, there's the pushing of these dark occult ideas. So we're back to that again. And unfortunately, you can't avoid it if you're really going to do a deep dive into the true nature of the music industry. So there's occult symbolism everywhere. Doesn't matter if people don't believe it. Doesn't matter if people don't place any stock in it. The point is the controllers of these industries do. And so they use things like music videos, big shows like the US Super Bowl halftime show, the Grammys, the MTV VMAs, and all of these to convey subliminally certain signs, symbols, ideas, themes, motifs, which get absorbed by the subconscious mind of the public that are viewing it. So again, people imagine that when they're listening to a favorite pop song or watching a favorite band perform or watching a Hollywood movie or a favorite TV show, they're just engaging in some harmless fun and entertainment. And unfortunately, all my research of the past 15 years and the research of many others has borne out that that's when your guard is down and that's when you're most susceptible to mind control. And that's how it all gets done.
So in some respects, we're talking about, to an extent, the power of suggestion, for one dynamic.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. So you've got master behavioral scientists, anthropologists who know exactly how the human psyche works and how to manipulate it. It's their full-time job to study this stuff. And so with what we've all been through the last 3.5 years, we've been coerced societally into certain behaviors and certain ways of life. Well, those who complied with it anyway. And all of that would have been cooked up by these behavioral scientists who simply seek to manipulate the way people think. And that's done through popular culture and entertainment just as much as it comes through government announcements and the mainstream media. So entertainment is a very insidious way of getting these agendas fulfilled. So my mission over the past 15 years has been trying to explain to people how they're being mind controlled without their conscious knowledge when they're listening to music or engaging with these bands. I'm not saying that people should never listen to music, because Lord knows we all need music in our lives. I'm just asking people to be vigilant and to engage their conscious minds so that if they're aware of what this industry really is and what it's really pushing, it's not going to have that subconscious subliminal effect on them, because it's like a stage hypnotist, really. Working his magic and getting people to behave in certain ways. That's what they're doing through popular culture and particularly popular music. So it is suggestion, it's mass hypnosis, and it's mass mind control.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess something that I've seen, I guess it's closely allied to fashion in some respects, because fashion plays a big part, the look of a band and stuff like that, and the band members. I guess that plays a massive part. And sometimes I look, from a fashion point of view, I think what on earth is going on? You know, you see people wearing bin liners and all these kind of like, you know, they're walking out with a lampshade on their head and all this kind of crap. And you're thinking, this is surely to make people look like idiots, or are they doing it to see just how far they can push you down a certain avenue? Is part of it to see just how complicit you are or how malleable you are, and that you can actually be manipulated in that way? Do they do it partly for fun and or partly, you know, that there's an overall agenda to take you somewhere? And if so, where are they taking us?
Yeah, there's usually more than one reason why they do anything. So there's a main reason which serves one of their agendas, but there'll be subsidiary reasons as well. And often one of those subsidiary reasons involves simply occult, morbid mockery. So these people, these groups, these secret society networks that we're talking about, they are dark occultists. They understand how to manipulate energy as well as manipulating people's thoughts and actions. And unfortunately, they're sick, they're mentally ill, they're very depraved, and part of their belief system involves mocking what they consider to be our profanity and our ignorance. So part of what they do is rubbing our noses in it, and they like to see how stupid collectively we are and how readily we'll fall for one of their agendas. What we're seeing now with a lot of these fashion statements that you're talking about, these expressions of fashion, is the fulfillment of agendas that have been in the offing for a very long time. There's the pushing of ideas of transhumanism, artificial intelligence. We're getting a lot of that right now. There's the pushing of the transgender sort of LGBTQ agenda, and that's exactly what it is. You know, this is no kind of statement on anyone's individual lifestyle choices or sexuality or anything like that. It's an agenda. I've got no problem with what anyone chooses to do in their own life, so long as it's their own free will decision. It becomes a problem the moment it becomes a social engineering agenda. And so that's why you see all these bizarre fashions popping up from time to time. And in the same way, I can confidently state that any A-list musician or band is going to be utterly controlled and answerable to these industry overlords. Unfortunately, it's the same with any fad, trend, movement, scene, genre. So I've just done a 4-part, quite comprehensive podcast series examining the so-called Second Summer of Love of 1988, which I was caught up in. You know, I was rife for manipulation at that time, and I fell for that psyop. This was the birth of the acid house rave scene in the UK, which was designed to pave the way for the explosion worldwide in electronic dance music. And long-term electronic dance music has been used to push ideas of transhumanism and artificial intelligence. That's just one example. And any acid house ravers from back in the day, late 80s, early 90s, who went to these amazing parties, they might have been out raving in a field, will be horrified to hear that. But unfortunately, the evidence does bear it out. And I'm not someone that makes wild statements to be controversial or to get views or to be liked. I don't do it for any of that. I just do it because I want to communicate what I consider to be truth and what I've found to be truth. And any information I do put out, I back up with citations and references so people can see where I got that information from. So I've singled out acid house and rave there, but it could be anything. It could be the punk new wave scene, the heavy metal scene, the 60s hippie counterculture thing. Unfortunately, none of these things evolved organically, and all of them can be shown to have occurred at the hands of master psychologists and social engineers. And again, I don't say that to hack people off and to get them to turn their backs on music or scenes that they were a part of in their youth. I merely ask people to become consciously aware of these facts so that the mind control spells can be broken. And I think a lot of headway is being made in that direction now.
So you're saying that a big difference can actually be achieved if people are just aware of, it's not necessarily not listening to stuff then, if I've got this right, but it's a case of if you're going to listen to it, just be aware of what the underlying message might be that they're trying to pump into you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, there's stuff that's going into recordings on an unseen level because so much music that's getting produced now is getting produced electronically and digitally. And we don't know what sort of elements could be added to a recording on an unseen level when it's electronic in nature. the potential is there for all kinds of damaging frequencies and other nefarious things to get put in there. But if your conscious mind is engaged, it's not going to have that same effect on you. See, they just rely on the subconscious. They always target the subconscious. That's the way advertising works. They're even very open about this. Master marketeers will, tell you that they're trying to target the subconscious mind of the general public to sell a certain product or idea. And this is the case with a lot of the symbolism. So a lot of people have noticed that certain signs and symbols are cropping up in music videos, have been for many, many years, and they just keep getting repeated. It's the same old things. We see pyramids, we see the covering of one eye. There are hundreds and hundreds of pictures of musicians, famous pop stars, covering one of their eyes with their hand, usually the right eye, indicating that they've chosen to take the left-hand path, getting into spiritual metaphysical matters. And then you've got the so-called 666 sign. I'm not going to do any of these signs because somebody's going to freeze frame the video and pass the picture around and say, see, I told you Devlin was a Satanist. So you'll have to look up these signs. But there's the so-called 666 sign. There's the Masonic shush sign, which involves placing of the index finger over the lips, denoting the telling of no secrets and oaths of allegiances to certain secret societies. So they put all this stuff out there, knowing that it's going to get soaked up like a sponge in the subconscious minds of people who don't know what they're looking at. But when you can comprehend what you are looking at, it's never going to have that same effect on you again. So I'm sure we've all seen these subliminal images where you've got the word sex cleverly hidden in a Disney cartoon or something of that nature. And it's not until somebody points out to you where it is in the picture that you see it. But once you see it, you'll never miss it again. Any time you see that image again, you're going to see that word sex instantly because you know where it is. So this is why it's so important to get this information out there, break those spells, and get people away from this subconscious manipulation that we've all been subject to.
Well, I think it's really amazing that you've referred to the same psychologists and stuff like that who have been, they admit it in marketing. They admit the subliminal in marketing. Now, I saw a marketing book which was actually openly using the arts of war by Sun Tzu to actually, it kind of ingrain and put into its techniques of marketing, even to the extent where there was a marketing technique which involved 144 people. You get it out to 144. I didn't read the whole thing, but you get it out to 144, and by some mechanism it can actually then get across the planet, right, the whole population. Now, if they're using similar techniques in music that they are in marketing, the subliminal, and in marketing, they admit that actually they're involving the arts of war. Well, then they're at war with you, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. There's some war that they're waging on you for some reason, whether it's spiritual or otherwise. One thing I found out recently, Mark, was it's a kind of fashion thing, but I think it's probably quite big amongst rappers, and I don't want to get in any trouble with any kind of gangster rappers out there. But this is the actual the fashion statement of wearing, for blokes, wearing the jeans below the arsehole, right? Excuse my French. And and I've always thought it's hilarious because I've seen a few people down the street trip over their trousers, right? Because their trousers are hanging down low and they've tripped over, But in actual fact, that's got another connotation, which I learnt recently, which is actually that's something which inmates in male prisons would do in order to advertise that they were available for rent, right? Or for other services.
Right. Again, we're back to mockery.
Yeah.
They love mocking us. And that's part of the emasculation of males, which is a big part of the social engineering agendas, particularly black males. I've been a fan of rap and hip hop music for a very long time. Well, I'm not a fan of what passes for it now because it's all straight garbage. But in the 90s, that's the stuff that I played out in clubs. And I was a big part of that scene. I loved it. I was into the fashion, wore my clothes all baggy. Didn't have my ass hanging out my jeans, but I used to have baggy T-shirts, And if somebody had come out in those times, in the 90s, sporting the kind of fashions that so-called rappers are now, they would have been shot. I'm not saying it's right or correct that they would have been. I'm just pointing out how times have changed. So now you've got so-called rappers who are out there in little tight up trousers, and they've got little tight pink tops, and they've got rainbow coloured hair, and they're rocking all these kind of fashions, little shiny red shoes and stuff like this. And if anyone had come out in the mid-90s wearing that stuff, they would have, like I say, just been shot before the morning sun had come up. But these days, it's completely acceptable. It's completely acceptable for black male rappers to dress that way, and they're accepted that way. There are so many male rappers now who've come out as gay, and it's just fine, nobody minds. There's transgender rappers, and again, this is no kind of judgment. I'm just saying that if anyone had come out in the mid-90s making those kind of statements, they wouldn't have lasted long. That's because the culture was different then. But there's been a slow drip effect, you know, this totalitarian tiptoe, to coin that term, where people have been coerced along certain lines and with certain ideas put into their minds, and it's been done gradually, year by year by year. So here we are in 2023, and all of that stuff is completely acceptable to this generation. So this is the way they get their agendas put out there. So now you've got so-called rappers who are embracing the climate change psyop. You've got so-called rappers who are glorifying ideas of transhumanism and AI. They're glorifying this LGBTQ agenda stuff. And because these individuals are idolized by such large numbers of people, it's a really great way of getting the job done. And the fans get these ideas put into their minds by those that they follow, these celebrities, and they will swear to you that when they have an idea or a take on a certain subject, it's their idea, it's come from their own mind. The truth of it will be that it's come from somebody else. I often quote in my public talks the book by Edward Bernays, The Master Propagandist. He had a book simply titled Propaganda, which he published in 1928, almost 100 years ago. And on the opening page, he says, "We are governed, our tastes mould, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of." And I think there's a common thread here with what you've been talking about all day. You've been talking about financial manipulations and banking scams and such. And so much of that has occurred at the hands of men whose names we don't know because they hide away in the shadows. So it's the same in entertainment and music as it is in banking and politics and everything else, because ultimately all this stuff is connected.
This is, I mean, I could probably listen to this all day.
Interesting. Really interesting.
I could talk about it all day.
Yeah, I bet you could. I bet you could. So, crew, have we got any questions for Mark?
Have you moved house recently?
Have
I
you
been
moved
what?
house recently?
No, but I'm just about to. You could probably tell.
Good luck,
Right.
congratulations.
Well, yeah. Stressful times.
Yeah, I can bet. No? Right, okay. Well, look, Mark, thank you very much for spending your time with us. Where should
No worries,
people
man.
come to find out more? Have you got a website? I presume you have.
Yeah, I do. My main website is djmarkdevlin.com, and there's links on there to my books, to my videos. There's an events page where you can find out where I'm doing live talks. My books are on Amazon, but if anyone wants to get them from me direct, they're welcome to send me an email. And I would just say to anyone who's been shocked by anything I've had to say here, and their default response was that can't possibly be true. Well, that was me 15 years ago when I discovered all this stuff. I was like, oh no, that doesn't sound right. I'm going to look into this and I'll disprove this in a heartbeat. And you find the more you look into it to try and disprove it, the more you reinforce the fact that this is actually true. So research bears all this stuff out. And it's a difficult path to go down when you first embark on it. But ultimately, it's very liberating because it's a very dignified thing to say that you've risen above societal mind control and that you can't be made a mug of anymore. It's a very good feeling.
Actually, I think you just hit the nail on the head there when you just said, in trying to debunk it, the research that people have to conduct actually would then, in effect, should show them whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose it's an obvious statement by me, but perhaps it's an invitation to people out there that are new to this stuff which is try to debunk it.
Yeah.
Right? Go out and do your
Exactly.
research with an open mind, but try to debunk it. And I think, as I mentioned at the very outset, ask the questions: what would you expect to see if it were true? What would you expect to see? And see if you can find it. And because if you can, and you can find it relatively easily, well then that in itself underlines something. It says something.
Well, let me give you one example before I go. I know we're wrapping up, but over the past 3.5 years, how many A-list musicians, household names that everyone knows, have come out with any kind of alternative narrative on what's been going on in the world to what we've heard from the mainstream media and governments around the world? How many names can you think of that have come out and said, well, actually, I see it this way, and I don't agree with that. This is my view. This is my standpoint.
A very few,
And
but
there's a
quickly
case in
shut
point.
down, right? Very few.
There you go. Do you not think that if artists were in control of their own output, creativity, if they had freedom of expression, we'd have had just a few, at least a few, that had some kind of alternative explanation on what was going on.
Yeah.
But we haven't.
Yeah. I don't
'Cause they're all
think,
owned.
I don't think is it John Lydon or whatever would have put up with that. Way back when Sex Pistols. I don't think he would have it, would he?
Well, he didn't say much, did he?
Well, no, but he certainly voiced his opinion every now and then, and certainly didn't mind taking an opposite view. But you don't have people speak out nowadays, do you? At all in music, really.
Well, we got Right Said Fred, but beyond that, you're struggling.
Oh, we're not doing too bad.
Yeah, he was a bit too
Before
sexy
we-
for what he was saying, though, wasn't he?
Before we let you go, are there any up and coming trends you can see that are going to be pushed through music and other avenues?
I just think it's going to be more of the same, to be honest. There's going to be more dark occult symbolism. It's getting more and more blatant. I'm seeing comments on TikTok now. TikTok is where teenagers hang out, young people. And they're noticing all this stuff in music videos. And they're starting threads saying, why is there satanic, occult symbolism in this new pop video by Doja Cat or whatever? And then others are saying, yeah, I've noticed that too. So it's so blatant what they're doing. But I just think they're just going to keep pushing and pushing it. And I've been amazed because through my research, I often get to the point where I say, well, that's it now. They can't take it any lower. It's impossible to debase and degenerate things any further. But they always find new ways. So I think they're just going to continue to push the transhumanism AI thing. They're going to keep harping on with the old LGBTQ agenda, which is what it is. And just continue to try and shape and mold young minds in that way. But what I find encouraging is the fact that we now have threads like that one on TikTok where young people, predominantly teenagers, are able to see through the BS and communicate it among their peer group. That's a very encouraging sign.
Yeah, it is. It is indeed. Right, Mark, brilliant. Thank you so much. Next year,
Cheers, guys.
we'll have to have you on to play a few tunes, right? Because I've been...
That would be great, wouldn't it?
I've been doing my DJ bit today. But so we'll definitely
We'll have a
you back
studio
next year.
rave.
Yeah, why not? So, big it up for Mark Devlin. Thank you, ladies. Thanks for coming on.
No worries. Cheers.
Right, okay.